You're listening to Intelligent Data, a podcast by Perficient. Perficient is a global digital consultancy that's transforming how the world's biggest brands connect with customers and grow their businesses. Throughout this series, you'll learn how valuable data is today and how it can transform your business. And now, here's our host, Arvind Murali, Data Chief Strategist and Principal at Perficient.
Hello and welcome to the Intelligent Data Podcast. In this episode, you'll hear Pawan Kumar discuss commerce, supply chain, and order management. We cover a number of factors influencing supply chain, COVID impact, startup landscape, and AI engines such as Pricer, Recommender, and Optimizer. And of course, we touched upon data privacy and compliance such as GDPR and CCPA. Pawan had a lot to share on how to use data in new ways to drive your business forward and to create that competitive advantage. I am certain you'll enjoy the show. In the era of rapid adoption of e-commerce, both online and brick-and-mortar businesses collect customer and behavioral patterns. Data and analytics is going to show you these patterns and will certainly increase personalization to target customers who are mostly going to be likely loyal to your business. In addition, multiple buyers, multiple sellers, markets, products, and it's a very interesting industry value chain. Here to talk more about the value of data in e-commerce, we have Pawan Kumar, who is a principal in Perficient's commerce practice. Pawan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Arvind. I'm very glad to be on your show. I'm a principal, as said, in our commerce practice. I have been doing consulting for over 20 years in the area of commerce, supply chain, order management, helping with the Fortune 500 customers, basically realizing the dream of end-to-end. How do they optimize their order management, commerce, and supply chain business?
Thank you, Pawan. So first, what is the difference between a global commerce implementation and customers who only have like US operations? Which one is more complicated in your opinion?
That's a great question, Arvind. We have seen both kind of deployments, and we do a lot of those deployments where customers are either just present or their operations are present in the US. A lot of those implementations are global in nature as well. The global deployments are certainly more complicated as compared to a single geography or a US implementation. And the reasons behind that is, different countries have different rules and regulations for how the data needs to be accessed, the data privacy and the security requirements. So that kind of drives, how your strategy for deploying those solutions, whether you're going to use a single instance to kind of take care of multi-geography, multi-country, multilingual currency, those kind of requirements or capabilities, or do you then implement or deploy individual instance solutions for the geographies or different countries? For example, many of our customers, they operate globally. Few things that we need to really think about, and what we do as part of our implementation is we need to think about their cross-border data transfers. We need to think about the different ways the payments and tax rules work in those regions. And then more importantly, also, how do you actually share inventory between those countries? How do you ship products from one country to other? A lot of the times it is not economical, but then when you have restrictions, as you have a lot of inventory sitting in a country or a fulfillment center in a country, it's not selling well. However, that same product's been selling like hotcakes in another country. How do you actually transfer that inventory where it has a better chance of getting sold faster and more profitable way?
Brilliant. So does geopolitical climate and culture impact that too? So what products sell hot in US may not be the same kind of products you want to sell in a China or Russia or some other country, right? Does that influence your commerce business mindset as well?
Absolutely. I'll give you a quick example. Let's say you have a product that's been manufactured in 3 different countries. And one set of inventory that you get from a country may not be acceptable to be sold or stocked in another country because of geopolitical issues, because of the tensions between those countries and all that, right? So you need to manage the intelligence of the data in the platform and make sure that you're not doing that mistake of selling the product from the country where it is manufactured, where it should not be. The other example is, you probably have heard about the Brexit rule, which is UK leaving the European Union. So there is a trade war, and most of our customers' implementation, we were actually using one single warehouse for the whole European distribution of the product. But then, as Brexit came in, we are doing a ton of projects with our customers where now we have to separate those warehouses. UK has their own warehouse versus the rest of the European Union has a separate warehouse and all.
Wow. Now, with this level of complexity, I'm assuming the kind of data you want is going to be extremely complex and granular. What kind of different data sets do you deal with when you have these levels of complexities?
Yeah, that is absolutely true. When you are dealing with data sets, such as, in our commerce and order management implementations, mostly we deal with product catalog information. We deal with a lot of customer segmentation and attribute related data, which is, again, it's very sensitive in nature, and every country has a different way of handling and making sure they're following the privacy and the security rules around those. Inventory is another one. You want to make sure that, as I said, you don't want to sell inventory from one location to another, which shouldn't be. So from the data perspective, it is hugely important that the people or the company should understand not only how the visibility of data is going to work, but how do we respect the separation of that data, and how do we actually make sure that the data is appropriately transferred between the different geos per the rules and regulations of that particular country.
Yeah, and that begs me to ask this question. So I'm sure you know what a value stream map is, right? The way to track your inventory in your entire supply chain. Where exactly is it getting stuck, or how is it moving forward? When you look at the complexity, you gave me an example of a geopolitical landscape, the Brexit situation. How do you keep track of all these things, especially if you build an end to end value stream chain, right? Is there like a squad per country, or is it elevated at a, I don't know, chief operations officer level, and you start from there and then go down? How do you think about this in the context of a global supply chain?
Yes, yes. So typically what happens is, let's say, take an example of inventory data. Usually we will see that the inventory is controlled by respective countries. So in this case, you will see a inventory control analyst in the US, and then a similar role in the Europe side as well, who is managing their inventory, making sure they have the right amount of inventory and all that. So they're controlling those data in that particular geography. So that's usually the way we have seen, and that kind of works out really well. The caveat to that is, now the inventory control guys between US and the Europe has to be in sync sometimes, right? Because it's an overall inventory that the company is carrying. But then the beauty of that is, everybody kind of works in their own P&L. So inventory as a cost, the cost of serving the customer, the cost of managing the inventory and all, kind of falls into within that geography's responsibility or within that country's responsibility.
So what you're saying is each country will have its own P&L, if you will, and then there will be a set of analysts who will drive the P&L, which is including the pricing, the inventory levels, and kind of segmentation of the customer themselves as to what product do I need to target in which segment. Each one of these is its own P&L. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Because again, from a country specific rules, those people understand what product sells better in the country, what the customer demographic information looks like, and when it's going to be more important for them to kind of push out relevant messages and making sure that their customers are well taken care of from a commerce and order fulfillment perspective.
Sure, sure. And you talked about this analyst. Let's double click on that a little bit. What kind of insights would they be looking for? Look, there's a theme called process mining, which is evolving in the world of e-commerce. For example, I've repeatedly heard this problem: processing an invoice when it takes more than 7 days. Either the buyer sues the company who's selling it, or the company that sells it sues their supplier because somewhere in the value chain something is broken. Process mining allows you to see where exactly in the value chain it is. So what do you think these analysts, what kind of insights do you think these analysts need to be successful?
So that is exactly some of the things that we see in our implementations. And your example about invoices, I'm going to take it and kind of detail that out a little bit. When you buy something from a supplier, it's probably getting manufactured in China or Vietnam or some other country. You need to understand when you cut a PO to them, they will, when they ship products, you need to first receive it, and then after receiving you need to kind of do a three-way match, meaning the analysts are now looking at what did I order, how many quantities did I get, when did I get, right? Because a lot of the times you don't get the whole shipment into one single shipment. It is many a times it kind of splits. And so the systems and the analysts, the people that are using the system, they should better know eventually at the end what they have received. And if there is anything on the way, they need to take care of that. So when they cut the invoice to pay the company who manufactured, they need to make sure they're paying the amount of inventory they actually received in their facility, not the amount of inventory that is maybe still in the waters or maybe is still in the manufacturing facility. So the analysts are kind of looking at the holistic visibility of the data. And a lot of the times what is happening is there are a lot of customers who are very sophisticated in managing their data. Of course, it has to be through the platforms and the tools that they were given. But a lot of, there are some customers that we deal with, they actually manage this kind of data on a spreadsheet. That is where it becomes extremely difficult for them to match and know exactly what they have received and what kind of invoice needs to go. They just don't have the visibility. Another example is, forget about cross-border or manufacturing. A lot of our B2B manufacturers, they sell through the distribution model or retail channels and all. A lot of the times they have difficulty in getting the data from their retail partners or distribution partners, which is either point of sale data or the way they are selling, to understand which products are selling better, where you are out of stock for some of the products and all that. So big corporations, they always struggle with trying to mine this data, whether it is structured or unstructured. They struggle a lot to kind of see, if first of all, whether they get the data from all their retail partners. If they do get, can they actually quickly convert it in a meaningful format that their systems can understand and take advantage of? Because manufacturers, it's a very beneficial piece of data. They can take that and use that for their product development from an engineering perspective and from a marketing perspective as well. And lastly, it's going to help them in increasing their brand image in the market and not losing to the competition. Because anytime you are in an out of stock situation at your retailer, the retailers are going to sell other products. They're going to sell products from your other competitors as well. So it's very important.
You touched up on a lot of different things there. Let me unpack that a little bit, right? Taking a simple example of a B2B or B2C. Let's take B2C, okay? Now, if you look at the supply chain of B2C, it starts with the customer, then the business that sells something to the customer, then for example, a warehouse provider who will maintain all the inventory for that particular retailer. Then it goes to the manufacturer who have to fill up those inventories. Now, as an analyst, do you think there are organizations out there, except maybe the Amazons, who have access to this end to end supply chain? Or do you see silos even within this entire supply chain, which is where it breaks down quite a bit? What is your thought there? You've mentioned an entire value chain right there.
Yeah. So I would say that from mature retailers, they do have visibility into their end-to-end supply chain and the data. Okay. Is it 100% accurate? Is it 100% perfect? No. And they do have breakpoints, and some places they're not doing better. Those are more of the mature retailers. If I have to name like Walmart's, Home Depots and all, they have a pretty good process. They understand what's been bought, what's been manufactured, and how many quantities do they have available to sell or fulfill customers orders. Okay, so Connecting the dots, I think they're quite matured from that perspective. But if you really look at, I'm going to take it to the B2B world. In the B2B world, I think that maturity is a little bit less. And it is also probably not about maturity. It is also about the complexity of their business processes, right? Because the B2B companies, in a case where it's a manufacturer, they have a lot more data that they need to deal with. They have a lot more processes that they need to deal with. For example, the manufacturing side of the house. What needs to be produced from raw material, because they need to track not only the finished good, but they need to track the raw materials as well. How many buttons do they need? How many threads do they need to build a shirt? How many clothes or fabric do they need to manufacture 100,000 units of a particular shirt? How many colors do they need to maintain, and those kind of stuff, right? So it gets into this whole complexity of how do I procure raw material, and what amount should I produce, and what my manufacturing capacity or my output should be. So those complexities, if you actually take into consideration all of that, it becomes a little bit complex, and that's where we have seen a lot of breakdown. And that's our job to kind of fix, go to those customers, consult with them, and try to see how we can gain visibility from end to end, and make this process more smoother.
I'm also going to throw in a little bit of thought process here. So what's interesting in what you said, Pawan, is this, right? Take an example of Best Buy. Best Buy sells a lot of electronics. I'm going to take one particular example of a printer that is manufactured by HP, Hewlett Packard. Now, if you actually look at the hierarchy of Hewlett Packard, your supplier for HP printers might be Hewlett Packard's one of the thousands of offices worldwide, or it might be one of the suppliers who supplies HP, but they actually don't manufacture HP printers. So this is where companies like Dun and Bradstreet are making a lot of money, because they are making this quote unquote hierarchy as a business. And they provide data products for companies like Best Buy, who can now leverage all the different offices, and they can go to their nearest supplier of HP, while D&B is making all the money here, right? So there are also these other companies that are supplying data, which is actually monetizing the data from what you said, isn't it?
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, again, at the end of the day, it is the visibility of the data, right? A lot of these organizations, even in your example in HP, because of the segregation of so many different fulfillment centers, and also their processes, because maybe HP has some contracting manufacturers who are making these products overseas, right? So they also don't get visibility into the data that they need to then send it to their suppliers or retail partners and all that. Whereas companies like you mentioned, Dun and Bradstreet and all, they're kind of mining that data and selling it.
Yeah, they're monetizing the data value, isn't it?
Yes,
That's what the whole purpose of this podcast is, to show people how you can monetize your data.
yes, yes, absolutely. We see that a lot often.
So, with that said, this complicated data ecosystem, how can you enable insights and predictive analytics across the supply chain?
Right, right. It is where actually a lot of people, a lot of the organizations are focusing. So if you really look at the pandemic situation that has happened, a lot of these companies took some knee-jerk reactions. Some of our customers, big manufacturers, they said, "Oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. How many units of a particular product we will be able to sell." So their knee-jerk reaction was to kind of slow down on the manufacturing side of the house, producing less supply, because they had no idea what that demand is going to look like in the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 4 months. The point is that these disruptions throughout the supply chain are inevitable. It's going to happen. It's going to happen because of unexpected customer behavior, traffic pattern, or weather, or any natural disaster, or maybe there is a labor unrest.
Yeah, the unknown unknowns, right? Which you cannot predict for, right?
Right. Everybody is now thinking is we need to understand our data better. We need to kind of mine the data and build some control towers. What the control tower is going to do, provide you visibility on all the AI infused optimization that were created through hundreds of models or maybe tens of models, right? To avoid markdown avoidance. Like I don't want to mark down my products just because the demand has gone down. Okay. Or it may have gone down for a couple of days, it may come up, right? So the human doesn't have the intelligence to kind of look at those patterns. So their organizations are investing very heavily on taking the data, centralizing it on a cloud, and then kind of using the AI, ML, and the models to kind of take the best optimization out of it, and that goes as an input to their planning process.
Interesting. I was actually on a call with a very, very, very large global OEM, probably Forbes top 10, if not top 20, maybe. Essentially, they're investing in AI as a conversational bot because they deal with their dealers and customers alike. What they want to do is they want your dealers and customers to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, can you show me an inventory of what's out there?" And this conversational bot will actually go and do all the back end research, similar to how a human will do it in the Excel file that you talked about, right? But this time it's all automated. So the focus here is not the bot itself. The focus is how much you can automate the process, where the intent is to focus on the supply chain itself and less about these manual labor intensive tasks, which most of the time it's about data gathering, it's about fact gathering or insights that you can get. If you automate my insights and I just know what the insight is, I can focus more on fulfillment, order fulfillment, and shipment, and less about data gathering. Do you see that quite a bit in the market? Like, is AI automating a lot of this?
Yes, absolutely. We are seeing a whole lot, and we are actually implementing for some of our top retailers, we are implementing optimizers. It will tell you if you have excess inventory at one location versus the other, how soon you can get it to the customer. So, three factors, right? If you really look at the whole supply chain, there are three main factors that I think are super important. The first one being everybody wants to provide their customers with the best experience possible, meaning, to retain the customer, for the customer to be loyal and all that. The second is when you try to do that, you need to make sure that you're still able to hit on your margin dollars. You're still very profitable. Your operational costs are kept low. And then the third thing is, how do you actually now try and increase your revenues by optimizing on the data, by optimizing and using AI ML. Now, take an example. It's not always beneficial. A lot of the organizations, they think I have 4 warehouses in the country. When I get an order, customer order, I should look at the close proximity warehouse and ship the product to the customer from that warehouse. That is not always the right strategy because the product mix in that order can be very different. And a lot of the times you may end up splitting the order and incur extra shipping cost and multiple packages that you're shipping out. So that may not be a right strategy. So we are optimizing on the inventory. We have a model, a AI model, where it's going to look at all the possible fulfillment centers and take decisions based on, of course, it's going to try and keep the promise date of the customer because that's super important. But then it will look at a lot of other cost factors, the carrier cost, the capacity cost, the cost of moving goods or handling goods in one warehouse versus the other, the labor cost, those kind of stuff. So there's a lot that we are seeing. I mean, there is actually a really good case study on Kohl's. They saved probably $20 million in just shipping costs by optimizing, by taking advantage of the shipping optimizer, where they saved a little bit of pennies or maybe some dollars on some orders and all that. They were, at the end of the day, they were able to spend a lot of money. So that's where the focus is.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of case studies by people doing PhD on optimizer, and then another one that comes to mind is recommender, right?
Yes.
So it's they call this the Netflix effect. You watch this, you go and do this. In traditional days, they used to call this the market basket analysis. Has recommenders gone seeped into the commerce side of the house, or is it still more focused on the front end where you build it on that side?
No, I mean there is a huge amount of attention on the supply chain, end-to-end supply chain. Commerce, yes, you can basically enable some statistics and analytics to kind of gain insight into what's selling better, how quickly or how conveniently your customers are able to convert the cart into an order and all that. But when it comes to the fulfillment of the order and all, we are seeing a whole lot of attention there, and one of the things, if you really look at the market, the data scientists are becoming so important. Every organization, they're looking for the best data scientists, and they're willing to pay whatever they need to pay, because this is where organizations think that they can optimize and make their business more profitable, and more manageable in the coming years.
Yeah, it is consistently the most wanted job in job sites, isn't it? The data scientist becomes the top 5 most wanted jobs. I don't know for how long.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing on the strategy side of the house, the pricing is a very complex strategy, right? So when you get to a pricing strategy, just look at the airline or the Uber model. They do their pricing based on the demand at that time. So when you travel, when you're booking, when you land at the airport, and we try to book an Uber, if there are 20 flights that has come that time and there's a huge demand, you're going to get a different pricing. So the pricing strategy becomes very important as well.
That is a fantastic point. So you've touched up on a lot of niche key differentiators, right? How do you see the market thriving with startups? Healthcare has picked up significantly, and there's a big number of startups getting funded by VCs the last 2 to 3 years. Do you see a lot of the startups emerging in your space as well?
Yes, huge number. And I'll give you a couple of examples, right? This whole optimization space with the AI, ML, and all that is a huge area where we are seeing a lot of different startups. They're trying to mine the data and, as you said, right, sell the data and sell the insights to the company.
In some cases, it's even the algorithm that they sell, but it's not that easy to build it, right?
Right. So that's one area. The other area, if you really, as soon as the COVID hit, every retailer, every customer wanted to, of course, they want to do business safely. So everybody needed same day delivery capability, or, curbside pickup. Now, in order to do that, in the last probably like 5 months, I haven't heard so many different startups or different solutions out there in the market that I have heard in the last 4 or 5 months, offering those kind of services and platforms that the retailers can hook into and provide whatever is needed. One of the solution we are actually doing some work with, that solution is Flyby, and they use the GPS data and your geolocation data, kind of tell if the customer has started from home or how far he is from the store, to pick his product. And as soon as the customer parks anywhere in the parking lot, even 3 stores away, a message pops up on the device, on the store associate device, and says, a customer is here, go and drop the products in his car.
Actually, Starbucks has a very similar effect if you've ever used the Starbucks app, right?
Yeah.
They are GPS enabled, and they will tell you what is the nearest store, and you can order it. And as soon as you go close to the store, they will get a notifier saying that Arvind has just come into the store, get ready with his order. So there will be a notifier there as well. That's awesome. So now let's jump into the digital marketing side of things, right? With so much going on the order management, the commerce, the fulfillment side, what do you guys feed to the marketing team that makes them personalize their campaigns? How do you enable the marketing team on from your side so that they can do what they need to do best?
So if you really look at most organizations, they're finding ways to let people or their customers promote their share of the story, as well as, making sure that their brand is getting some differentiation in the market. A lot of the times, not only that we push the product data to the central data hub, I would say, where then you can use it for marketing campaigns and generate marketing automation, those kind of activities. But the primary set of data that we are kind of feeding into the marketing channels are order data, the buying behavior of the customer. What are they buying? What styles they're buying? What products or what colors they're buying? Because that goes into the seasonality determination as well as for the upcoming season. What do I need to manufacture more, or what do I need to store? The other is the demographic data, right? If you really look at, let's say, Ohio versus New York, a fabric retailer that we serve, it's very different. The way they actually promote and do marketing campaigns and target those customers is super different. It is because of the demographic differences and the millennial versus little older folks and all that.
Gen Z, Gen X, yeah, so many generations they call. Does this also feed into the segmentation side, Pawan? The demographics info? So when a marketing person is thinking about how do I segment my customers, maybe these insights that the commerce and the order management team is providing will be helpful for them to determine that. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And that is a big piece, right? Because the segmentation is very important. You don't want to send a marketing email or a text, which is very irrelevant for a segment of customers, right? They may not even, it's going to be super ineffective if you have to do it that way. So it is very important that segmentation and the relevancy of those marketing information is very important. I'll give you a quick example also on that. One of the nation's largest retailer, and this happens in my household. My wife would order a few things from the retailer, and she gets in their own native app, she will get a notification saying, your order is ready for pickup, or for you to come on curbside and pick it up. What these guys do, and I really like the way actually they use, because every time you get a chance to interact with your customer, you should take that advantage to market yourself, your products, or whatever not. So through that message, what they also do is they'll send you a message and say, by the way, this week we have a promotion going on. If you buy $25 worth of P&G products, we are going to give you a $5 gift card. The immediate reaction is, okay, let me order that. That's an amazing deal. Let me order that. And then I will go and pick both my orders together. So that is where the targeted, and how do they know that my household uses P&G products? It's because of the buying behavior and the data that we are actually sending it through the supply chain to those marketing machines.
I hope somebody from CVS Pharmacy hears this, because when I go to buy stuff from CVS Pharmacy, you know what they do? They give me a 80-foot long receipt that says you got $2 off for a candy, $1 off for Halloween costume, whatever. But oh my God, they give it to me as a printout, as a receipt printout. And I'm thinking to myself, had you only be able to send me a text message to say you've got these offers, I have a quick way to go and search for it. And next time when I come and shop with you guys, I'll use my coupons.
Right. It's all about digital marketing these days, and people are making differentiation among their peer, among their competitor with that, with higher and better capabilities, enabling those. And, it's not easy sometimes. It takes a considerable amount of effort, resources, and time to implement the more effective digital marketing. For example, for customers, they use a ton of different type of tools, right? They use Telium for marketing, Data Hub. They use Sprinkler for social media marketing. They use Mercado for automation. Then on the analytics side, they use Google, Adobe Analytics, and those kind of stuff. So the importance is that then you need to understand what all those tools are going to do for you and have a clear delineation of the purpose and the responsibility of the tools.
No doubt. I cannot end this podcast without talking about data privacy, especially on a global scale of GDPR and CCPA compliance. How does that impact you, Pawan? How does your implementation get impacted with all these regulatory constraints?
It's huge for us, and especially when you are looking at from an end-to-end supply chain perspective. When you capture, first of all, through our commerce platforms and all, we would like to first capture as much information as we can get from the customer. When they sign up, we want to ask them a few questions, say, oh, what are your preferences? Do you like that? Do you like this? And all that. How would you like to be notified and all? So that's the first step. When the customer is registering him or herself, that's the first step that we try to collect that data outside. Then what happens is, as part of their online account, we give them options to opt in or opt out on either communications or marketing campaigns or surveys, those kind of stuff. According to the GDPR rule, right, the customer has the right to opt in, opt out, and you shouldn't, after they opt out, you shouldn't keep their data or erase it or whatever not. Again, different countries have different rules and regulations around that front. But the most important and the most complex piece for us, especially in the supply chain, is you have to transmit that data to another system. Now, when the customer comes and says, okay, I'm going to opt out of this in the commerce layer, you have the responsibility to now syndicate that message out to 15 other systems that you have originally syndicated that data out, letting them know that you need to be now compliant. You cannot, the customer opted out. So you have to do what we did in our system, which is to make sure this guy doesn't get the additional emails or communications, or he's opting out of revealing any data or asking them to erase all the data that they previously hold.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where something like master data would come in play, where it'll centralize your, especially things like opt-outs aligned to a customer, unique customer, and then it'll distribute all this information consistently to the 15 systems that you talked about, right?
Correct. So usually we use a CRM-based systems where we would take the information from, and then we would trigger that, or any event that changes it, we actually go to that CR master data system and let them know so they can syndicate it out to the rest of the systems as well.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much for all the information you've provided so far. What advice would you like to give to our listeners, especially executives who are listening to this podcast? Like, what should they be or should not be doing in the context of commerce and supply chain and order management side of things?
I would definitely say that the power of data is unimaginable. It can help you build up a really good business. It can take you down as well. So the data is very important for you to mitigate your risk, optimize your execution, and of course, visibility. I would recommend that when you have a new project to start with, you have a vision, you have a business problem that you need to solve, you need to ask yourself, what data do I have to solve that business problem? What additional data do I need to collect? Now, once you have done that, you have to now ask the second question, how can I make this data useful with the systems which is going to run the business rule side of the house as well? And then how do you syndicate and make that data provided to your business partners as well, so that it's a very easy and convenient way for you to do business with your business partners as well and grow revenues and all that. So data is very important in the vision and in the things that you want to do, the capabilities that you want to provide to your customer. Gain competitive advantage by unlocking the value of the supply chain data that you have in your own systems or maps that you have in your organization.
Well said. So be transparent, mitigate, optimize, and use data and insights to run your business. You've talked a lot about B2B and B2C. Pawan, thank you so much for being on the show with us and discussing the Amazon-like experience, if you will, and the value of data and analytics. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Arvind.
Thanks for tuning in to Intelligent Data with Arvind Murali. Subscribe to our podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. You can find this season along with show notes at Perficient.com. Or listen to this series on top podcast platforms, including Apple, Google, Spotify, or Amazon.